My name is Jada Shapiro. I'm the founder of Boober. Boober is a platform where expectant parents and new families can find all of their pregnancy to postpartum care providers like birth doulas, postpartum doulas, lactation consultants, mental health therapists, and pelvic floor therapists, lots and lots more. We also teach lots of different classes to help people prepare for the journey, or if they're on the journey, wherever you are. So hopefully you'll come visit us there. I'm excited tonight to welcome you to Hatch Collection, which does lots of great digital events around getting pregnant, being pregnant, birth, postpartum. And today, in honor of Infertility Awareness Week, we have three parents here. We have Michael. Michael, how do I pronounce your last name?
Wieder.
Michael Wieder, co-founder of Lalo. We're going to talk about Lalo. Michael Wieder is co-founder, president, and CMO at Lalo. More importantly, he's the dad to Jemma. And utilizing his diverse experience helping build world-class brands, Michael oversees all of Lalo's marketing and consumer engagement efforts. Prior to founding Lalo, Michael had various leadership positions and gained lots of valuable entrepreneurial experience, having founded a fitness tech brand and music management production firm. So he's living in Brooklyn still. I have that down. I don't know. With your family. All right. We also, and we'll have you all say hello. We also have Marise Angibeau-Gray. If I said that right, Marise, tell me.
Angibeau.
Angibeau. Okay,
Yeah.
I should have said it. Angibeau-Gray, who is a full spectrum doula, fertility wellness advocate, mom of Memphys, 22-month-old little girl, and 3 angel baby boys. And she is a full spectrum doula specializing in pregnancy after loss, infertility, and postpartum after pregnancy loss. And she's going to tell you about all of her story and loss and why she was called into this work to support families as well. And Marise is also on the Boober platform as a doula, so lovely to have you here. And we have Simone Shepherd, who's an influencer and writer, mom to 8-week-old. And Simone, maybe you should pronounce, I don't want to say it wrong. Keraun, Justen Harris Jr. And Simone Shepherd is an American content creator, actress, comedian, writer, and online media sensation. She rose to fame through her popular videos through Vine and has a large following on Instagram of over 500,000 people, where you can really get to learn her story and see her little babe and what she's going through. A multi-talented individual and an accomplished actress, and here to really share her story as well around infertility. So we're hoping that by sharing all of this with you all, this will support all of you along your journey. So first, I'm just going to ask you all to introduce yourselves. So Simone, if you want to take it away first.
Oh, yes. Like you said, I think you covered it on my many jobs. But I think that the one thing that was missing was I'm a maternal health advocate now. Since I've gone through my issues with infertility, specifically with uterine fibroids, I've become an advocate and specifically for African American women, because we disproportionately suffer from numerous fertility issues. So I've kind of shifted directions on my platform to really focus and give women a place to have the conversation about becoming a mother and all their issues.
Yes, and thank you so much for that work. And as we're just coming off of Black Maternal Health Week, so grateful for the work that you're doing. Thank you. And Marise?
Yes. Again, I think you totally covered it, Jada. I have had quite a journey to becoming a parent and being a mother. And it has led me to doula work, which has been so rewarding and so amazing. And definitely exploring just the world of reproduction and all the things that, we really need to get back to, as far as getting back to basics and understanding how our bodies work, understanding how our environment plays into how we build our families, and how families really just truly need support from the community, from, people like us. So yeah, I'm just here to talk to you guys, and, would love to share and also get some really great insight from these wonderful panelists.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and Michael.
Yeah, so great intro. I'm one of the co-founders of Lalo, building a baby brand for this generation of parents, and went through the journey of infertility while building the brand pre-launch, and got a ton of learnings and exposure to the world of infertility, all while building a brand and products for parents and babies, and also from a male perspective, the support that I played, the neglect for my own support that I went through, and all while doing this in a world where it was expected that I would be a parent, and how did I balance kind of that communication and kind of public vulnerability was definitely a part of what I had to go through.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for, all kind of touching on and being here to share your personal experiences. And I think that's what kind of makes this night special, is that you're willing to be here and be out about kind of, how you came to this journey or how you came through this journey. I think one of the things, in Infertility Awareness Week, the development of the campaign was really to aim to raise the awareness around infertility and really help change the conversation, right? Because anybody can be challenged to have a family, and it's more common than I think people realize, right? There's, I think the latest stat that I read was that 1 in 8 couples. Yeah. So, I think let's talk a little bit about how, the journey of infertility, maybe just a little bit of each of your personal stories, I think would be really helpful for people to sort of hear. And then I have some questions for sure. Simone, why don't you jump in?
I'm talking, right? So my infertility journey started maybe like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was first diagnosed with uterine fibroids. And it was so interesting because I was a starving artist living in LA, had no plans to start a family, at that time, but knew I wanted a family, always knew that I was going to be a mother. So when I started dealing with the symptoms of uterine fibroids, really heavy periods, and started going to the doctors to seek help, it's a very scary thing being a Black woman going to the doctors, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I really commend Black birth workers like you. Marise, am I saying your name wrong? Marise, yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Because we need women like you to give us more information, right? Because I didn't have any. And so when I was going to the doctors, I was told numerous times, actually by 5 different doctors, that I needed a hysterectomy, right? But I had to become my own advocate. So I didn't let those, like literally 5 diagnoses telling me, you need a hysterectomy, you need a hysterectomy. So I finally found a doctor who told me, listen, that's not what you need. You just need more information and you need to have some more options. So I actually had surgery to have my fibroids removed. But once I had surgery and talking to my doctor, I found out that Black women, period, are disproportionately affected by uterine fibroids. Not only do we get them much larger, but we get them much younger. So I was here in my early 30s being told that I would never have children. And it was very scary. I'm an artist. I wasn't ready to settle down and give up my hopes of, having a family before I had even made plans to have a family. So I had to have the surgery. Once I had the surgery, I found out that it wasn't just about having the surgery. It was also about making major lifestyle changes, right? I was someone who grew up eating McDonald's and didn't know that all of these different hormones and carcinogens in your body could affect your maternal health. Like I just had no clue. So upon doing research and talking to wonderful women who also suffer from similar issues, I realized that I had to make a major lifestyle change. So I went vegan, started drinking alkaline water, started meditating, started, exercising, doing yoga, making major lifestyle changes, and on my road to motherhood, because, I wasn't willing to give up the hope that I was going to be a mother. I knew I was going to be a mother. And, although I had so many doctors who were just willing to give me, just cavalierly just giving me a diagnosis and tell me, hey, you need a hysterectomy, like no big deal, weren't willing to do their due diligence or go the extra mile for me. And I firmly believe that it was because I'm a Black woman. And when we go to the doctors, people don't care about us. They think that we have higher pain tolerances, and that just will be okay, right? And that wasn't okay. I was in a relationship. I knew that, you know, we wanted to eventually start a family, and I wasn't willing to take it off the table. So I'm just really grateful that I found a doctor who was so amazing at what she does. And I know that's really hard for a lot of women to find doctors who they can trust, especially Black women, just women of color, period. And so that process of me healing my body, because that's essentially what I did. I had to have the surgery, and then I had to change my life, make lifestyle changes, set me up to be able to have a baby. So last May, after a very long journey, it was almost 6 years before I was able to conceive. I conceived naturally, which was a big deal, because even though I, had the surgery, I still always thought and was told that I possibly will have to have some infertility treatment. And, I didn't have to. I just needed to actually do the work to heal my body naturally, which I was able to do. So I'm standing here, a mother.
Yeah.
It's only been for 2.5 months, so I'm still in that no sleep stage. Still the most amazing thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life was become a mother. I'm eternally grateful for the process. So I'm just now becoming, an advocate for other women to become their own advocates when it comes to their maternal health.
So important. Thank you so much, Simone. And it's so exciting. You have a 10-week-old.
Yes, he's 2.5 months.
2.5 months? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Marise, why don't you tell us about your journey?
Yes. So firstly, Simone, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is so amazing. And you look fantastic to have a 2-month-old.
I appreciate it. I received the compliment because how I feel is completely different.
Yeah, I totally understand. Totally, 100%. So yeah, I mean, I actually feel a lot of what Simone said, just as far as like totally having to advocate for yourself. I think that is something that that's actually what brought me to birth work. I learned this after having my first miscarriage. I was 31 years old. I also was not in a place where I was looking to start a family at the time, but being pregnant for the first time was probably the most thrilling, exciting thing that I had ever experienced. And I had a doctor at the time who, I assumed was looking out for me. It was it was a woman. So I just figured, and she also was a mother. And I had been experiencing symptoms that could have been an indication for me potentially having a miscarriage. But they were ultimately dismissed with this doctor. And then when I finally did have a miscarriage, then it was like all of a sudden the discussion of miscarriage came up. So that was really alarming to me, and that was a super traumatic experience. Besides being heartbroken, I was also just so shocked that this conversation just wasn't happening. And not just in the doctor's office, but also outside of that, among my peers and, in the community. Social media wasn't as big back then. That was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So, we didn't have as much discussion online, but I was just so surprised to find out as I started to research how common pregnancy loss is, especially in the first trimester, and how it's a lot of times just deemed as being, there are unknown causes. So that didn't sit well with me. I didn't feel right about that. But of course, I wanted to continue to be optimistic as I moved forward. So about a year later, I discovered I was pregnant again. And this time I was starting to experience some of the same symptoms, having some bleeding. So I thought I was having another miscarriage. But then it turned out that, I had something called a subchorionic hematoma, which is sort of a blood clot that lodges between the uterine wall and the placenta. So that can cause some bleeding, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to miscarry. It's something that's actually pretty common in pregnancy. So once I passed the first trimester, what you're often told is that, hey, once you get past those 12 weeks, you're in the safe zone. So I did. I got through the first trimester. The bleeding had stopped, and I thought that, okay, hey, I'm gonna, have this wonderful pregnancy and this wonderful birth. Started planning a natural birth. Was seeing an obstetrician who worked with midwives, so I was mostly seeing the midwives during my visits. And in hindsight, I look back at those visits and realize that, again, I just felt like the care was neglectful. There were also things that were happening in that pregnancy. Like, I also had a huge cyst that wasn't really fully being monitored. I would get ultrasounds and test results would never come back to me. There was kind of a lack of communication. And I got to 19 weeks of pregnancy and started feeling sensations that at the time I didn't realize, but they were contractions. I was having contractions, and I started bleeding again. So I went to the local hospital. I went to the ER, and the care that I received in the hospital was devastating. Again, completely neglectful. And I will say to anyone who is listening to this right now, if you are pregnant, do not go to the emergency room. You go to whatever hospital you are closest to, and you go straight to the labor and delivery department, because in an ER, the doctors in the ER have no idea what to do with pregnant women at any stage. So you do not take no for an answer. You go to the L&D if you absolutely need to go to a hospital. So yeah, again, my care was, I was treated with the most callous, cold care. And I was essentially just told that, hey, your cervix is incompetent. This was the word that's used. Your cervix is incompetent, and it's starting to open, and there's nothing we can do to help you. There's nothing we can do to save the baby. You're just going to have to deliver this baby at 19 weeks. I was also kept in the ER instead of being sent up to the L&D department with more experienced nurses and more experienced providers, because I was 19 weeks, which is still considered, you're still in they categorize that as a miscarriage versus a stillbirth. Because I was literally a few days shy of 20 weeks. So I was told to stay in the ER and essentially labor in the ER on my own without any support. So again, that was actually the fire that was lit under me to fully learn everything that I could about reproduction, about being an advocate, and more importantly, that no other family should ever have to go through this, especially alone, and that people need information and people need support, and I needed to do something about it. So that was actually the beginning of my journey to wanting to get into birth work, and also just to learn, like I said, all that there was to know about these things. I started having a lot more robust conversations with friends who, Simone, like so many of my friends have fibroids or endometriosis, or my best friend has PCOS. And it was just all around me, and it was so unfair that we just were not sharing these things and these struggles with each other. And I just felt like I cannot stand for this anymore. I can't stand for it anymore. So I continued on, got pregnant again, shortly after having that loss, and this time I had much better care. I worked so hard at finding the right providers, doing all the research that I thought, I could do to just set myself up for success in this pregnancy. Unfortunately, I had another loss at 29 weeks. And this time it was like, I think that I did everything I could. I know that I was getting the right support. But again, sometimes these things happen. And I just felt like, I have to use this heartbreak to somehow put love back into the world. So after that, it took me a couple more years to finally take the full leap into becoming a full spectrum doula. And it was really what did it was finally getting pregnant again about a little over a year later with my now daughter, Memphys. And just like indulging so much in how joyful that was. And then also realizing how scary and how anxiety driven I also was during that pregnancy after having all those losses and all the devastation, and knowing that I'm also up against a system that's not necessarily, fighting for me and doesn't necessarily want the best for me. But finally hearing her first cries and, just having those moments just made me know that this is where I need to be. Like, I need to help people to realize that they are so powerful. No matter how many things, no matter how many hurdles are trying to keep us in this place of, just hopelessness, that we are so powerful and that our bodies work and that there are so many things that we can achieve if we do it together as a community and if we have the right support. So hence today I am a full spectrum doula and
a mommy.
Yes. Here for it all.
See, you had me tearing up. It was too much.
Yeah.
It was yes.
Yeah.
Resonated with me on so many levels.
Yeah. Maurice, your strength is incredible.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Maurice, for sharing all that you did with us and just being here and supporting everybody else who may be going through this. And, and I think you bring up a point, which we'll talk about in a moment, is, after loss, being in the pregnancy again, and that a lot of people don't understand the kind of anxiety or control issues or things that come up for parents, and not everybody can support them in their immediate circle until we start having these conversations to explain why we might, feel that way. So, Michael, let's hear from you.
So I'll never forget a conversation I had with my now co-founder, Greg. We were old colleagues and catching up, and Greg said, I think there's something here to build a baby brand that like really cares about parents and does things a little bit differently. And at the time, he wasn't even married, and he said, and he knew, I was married, and he like flat out asked me, he's like, are you guys thinking of having kids? And I was like, first of all, yes, I'm in for doing this with you. And second of all, yes, we just started trying, and, nothing better than making, building something as an entrepreneur for you personally and putting all your passion into it. So that was in August 2017. We're about a month or two into trying. So, the entire time we're going along building this brand, we're getting prototypes, we're meeting with investors, the whole deal, still no baby. Fast forward about a year, we're, really getting ready to launch, still no baby, talking to PR teams, talking to investors, like, neither you are parents, what's going on? And, at that point, I kind of just like something flipped. I went from like completely not telling anybody publicly to telling everybody publicly. There was one investor meeting where I was kind of just like, it was like exactly what you would expect a VC to look like. White, slick back hair, Manhattan office. And I just was like, look, dude, you have no idea what's going on. So if that's why you're not going to invest in us, cool. And from then on, just started sharing just more openly, publicly, and it became part of our story. We were building something, or I was building something for me, for my family, and my family wasn't existent yet. It was me and my wife. So we ultimately get to launch, and I'm still not a parent. At that point, we've done multiple IUIs. We had done 6 IUIs, some of them double IUIs. So going back, the next day to do it, and it's like so ridiculous. And at this point, we had unexplained infertility, which, we're like, why isn't this happening? The doctor is saying there's no sign, male or female, no indicator of what's happening. We've done my wife was like, same thing about changing her body, insane diets, anti-inflammatory diet, acupuncture. I was going to acupuncture, as I'm, in the entrepreneurial grind, going to acupuncture. My wife bought me maca root extract. Like, I was like, whatever I could do, like, just whatever, let's get this done. And still not happening. So ultimately, the next course of action was IVF. And, we're extremely, extremely fortunate to have been able to afford IVF. Luckily now it seems like there's a lot changing in terms of insurance coverage for IVF, but at the time, no insurance coverage, everything out of pocket. We applied for some grants, didn't get grants, and ultimately, we're able to put the money up to do it. And we got our first bit of good news in that, like, the retrieval was abundant. 12 eggs, and ultimately 10 became viable embryos, which was like, after all this bad news, that felt like a bit of good news. But then, for anybody that's done IVF, it's like the roller coaster is like just starts then. So we did a first transfer, and that 2-week window, and in between a transfer, finding out if it implanted is just like, that's like it's almost like every hour you're like up and down on a roller coaster. And like, a lot of, first of all, I'm injecting my wife with drugs leading up to those retrieval. Like, it is just like so insane. And then first transfer failed, second transfer failed. And we're sitting there like, I don't know, it was my wife's birthday. I'll never forget. And she starts talking about adoption, like, and, the different options for starting our family. And, personally, I like was rejecting that in the moment. It was hard to hear that, giving up this thought of like starting your biological family. In hindsight, I think it's a little easier now to like think of that as would have been a viable option. And then ultimately, we went and sought a second opinion, because we thought, like, if 2 transfers didn't work, like, what could happen? We get to our second opinion, and that doctor says to us, "You have probably the most respected doctor in New York. I wouldn't change anything he's doing. Go back. It's probably just bad luck." And he doesn't take us on as a patient and says, "Go back to your existing doctor." And we tell our doctor we got a second opinion. This is what he said. And he said, "I agree. I really do think it's bad luck." And luckily, on that third time was a charm. And in February 2020, we welcomed our daughter, Jemma.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. And amazing that you just started talking about it while going through the journey and because it's like so important. And I think that, right?
My wife was very, very open always. And she thought it was really important to be open, but she quickly found a support group. She like made friends that were like going through the same thing to her, people she could relate to, talk to, because she found in her circle, as much as her friends loved her and support her, like there was not, someone always said the wrong thing that struck a chord. Like, you needed to find the people that really understood. You never wanted to, and there really wasn't that on my side. Like, there's no one like a guy to really turn to and say, like, here's what's going on. Plus, like, at the end of the day, in a couple like ours, like, her body is getting affected, right? Like, the hormonal surges are insane. Like, as much as like I'm going to, it's not even close. Is not even close.
Thank you for acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Of course, it's like not even close. But at this, there's the role you have to play in supporting your partner first. That came first to me, at least. And then the rest, like I was an entrepreneur building a business. Like I had very little bandwidth to like outside of that, like starting a business and supporting my wife to even think about myself. But it, you know, obviously in retrospect, you can see like the neglect that happened in terms of like my own emotions and own part and role in the journey, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
I would love to hear, from Marise and Simone also. Did you, how did you guys talk to your families? And Michael, like when did you first tell your families what was going on, if ever? How did you derive support or realize that they were not the ones to support you at the time? And your wider families.
Okay, I'll go.
Let's go ahead, Simone.
What happened to me was, as I suffered in silence for a very long time because, just being a Black woman, we don't talk about infertility struggles. We don't talk about a lot of our struggles because we're already dealing with so much when we step out into the world just being a Black woman. The last thing that we're going to sit around and talk about is the fact that, we also can't get pregnant or conceive. So I realized, I suffered for a very long time. And then after I had gotten all these diagnoses about, that I needed a hysterectomy, I found myself like leaning on my friends for support, like finally just saying, this is what I'm going through. And when I started having this conversation with them, I realized that so many of them were going through the same thing or had gone through something similar. I had one friend who I was really close to, had a beautiful daughter. She was 5 years old at the time. And I was like, look, I found out, this about my fibroids and they're telling me I need a hysterectomy. She was like, girl, I had fibroids. I had 2 surgeries. One of them went terrible. And I still was able to conceive my daughter. And she starts telling me the story. So I was like, well, she's part of the reason why I didn't stop seeking out new doctors, because I had this conversation with her. But what's even deeper for me was once I realized I had these fibroids and got comfortable having the conversation about them, I took them to my social media. So at that point, I had only been doing funny and, comedic videos. I was on Vine and then took the same type of entertainment to Instagram and Facebook. And then I had went dark for a while because I was going through this trauma. And then I finally just went to my audience and was like, hey, this is what I've been going through. I suffer with uterine fibroids. This is, my journey. And I was overwhelmed. Within 3 days, I got over 1,000 messages, emails, and DMs. And they were like long messages of women who were also telling me that they were suffering from the same issues. So I was like, wait a minute. And they were, the majority of my audience are Black women from the ages of 18 to about 42. And they were all reaching out to me at different stages of their journey. Either they had gone through it and then were able to conceive, or had hysterectomies, or were currently suffering with the same issues. And they were all asking me, what did you do? What do we do? How do we, we need to have this conversation. I realized more than anything, these women wanted to have the conversation. They wanted to have someone to talk to about what they were going through, and they didn't have anybody. So then I was like, okay, I have to remove this stigma, and I have to go straight to people and start having this conversation. So I started engaging with them, started making more content around my issue and discussing other issues, because it's not just fibroids, it's a bunch of different infertility issues that women suffer with. And especially Black women, like I said, we have to be our own advocates, because our experiences, I can't imagine you can talk to one Black woman who hasn't had a bad experience with a doctor or been misdiagnosed or mistreated by our healthcare industry. So to be able to talk to each other about it was like, okay, no, make sure you ask this question. That treatment doesn't really work. Do this. We were able to go back and forth, and I was able to really start the conversation. So my audience, believe it or not, as much as they were used to seeing me doing funny content, shifted completely with me and wanted to have this conversation about these fibroids. So when I started having this conversation, and then I found that I was pregnant, I kind of even went dark. It was all the social unrest. I was dealing with a lot of trauma, wanted to have a successful pregnancy. So I was like, I went dark for my audience, and they were like, where are you at? We want to have these conversations. Only to announce, once my son was born, that I in fact was pregnant. So now the conversation has opened up even more and they want to know even more what happened. So my goal is now not only just to tell my story, but to tell all women's story, because my story might not, it might not reach somebody, but someone else's story may affect them more. So I just want to just make sure that we're having the conversation, because we weren't having the conversation at all, especially in our community. And I know that you could probably attest to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was never quiet about it. I've always, because I'm a bleeding heart. Like, I literally wear my heart on my forehead, and I've always been very vocal about, how I'm feeling. And that was my way of, just trying to survive, was by sharing and talking about it. But I think what was interesting about sharing it with, my very close family and very close friends, was that I think it was such an eye-opening experience for them. And it was also kind of like secondary trauma for them. It was something that, because it's just not a conversation, that we've had in my family, that I've had really in my circle. I think for them, it was just like, wait, your mother had 3 healthy pregnancies and never had a miscarriage. And, the majority of your family also, that has been their experience. So the assumption was that, like, oh yeah, you'll go on and it'll be the same for you. And when it wasn't, it actually forced my mother in particular to start recalling, hey, yeah, my sister, she struggled with, miscarriage. But it was almost like she kind of put that somewhere she buried it really deep down, in her soul, and never really thought about how not only did that affect, my aunt, her sister, but then also how that affected her and her perception of being able to bear children. And, and then she thought, even further back, like, hey, my maternal grandmother actually died in childbirth. And who knows what the complications were around that. So it's like, it started bringing up these things from, my history. And that was something that I was like, okay, I absolutely need to keep talking about this. But I also know that I need to seek support outside of just my loved ones, because there's an understanding and there is just an empathy that they're going to struggle with. And I also want them to be able to explore how they feel on their own and to heal from those feelings. So definitely being part of a support group with other families who have also experienced loss, who've also experienced infertility and loss, who've had complicated pregnancies, was everything for me. And I had shared it on social media, and the same with you, Simone. Like, it was, I don't have like a huge following, but most of the people that, I'm connected with on social media are people that I actually, I know them. I know these people. And it was like, once I started sharing, I was just inundated with, hey, me too. I've had losses before. Like, I've struggled to get pregnant. It was just amazing. And what I also, again, found to be sad, it made me sad, was that a lot of the responses were coming to me directly instead of being put out in the open. There were still a lot of people who were just feel like they can't share it, and they still had to suffer in silence. So yeah, that has been my experience. And now I think it's just so amazing that, there is so much more conversation. And now I think these experiences are being normalized. Like, I love that there are so many podcasts and websites that, basically are just centered on birth stories and just centered on people's stories, you know what I mean? And their own experiences, because that is what we need. We need to know that we're not alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what's so incredible. I think, you know, having owned a childbirth education and doula training company for so many years, for almost 18 years, you know, there is a percentage of people who've booked classes or who've come through who have go through miscarriage, and it happened, you know, I get calls many times a year. And so I'm more exposed to the amount of people, I think, who are experiencing loss. I'm also, as a longtime doula, right, the person that a lot of people do talk to. And I think, again, like the more we talk about it, the more we go, okay, there's a whole spectrum in life. And if we leave out all of the people who are experiencing miscarriage, or who are experiencing infertility, or going through it, or whatever they're going through, we can't just leave everybody out. We all need to be here and process and talk. And I think so much of it is the other people, I think, as you brought it up, Mauree, is like the other people's discomfort, right? Because I don't think there's a lot of training around supporting around grief, or in general of any sort in this country, you know? And so I think it's opening up that conversation. You know, here's a question for all of you. I would love to hear how your infertility journey has changed you, which is one of the questions, Marise, you dropped to me, which I thought was a really wonderful question. So I would love to hear from all of you, like, how has the infertility journey changed you?
Michael?
Yeah,
Oh,
Michael.
Thank you, guys. Well, it changed me because it made me a dad. I mean, it changed probably the way I listen to my wife, and the way I try to support her needs. It opened up a different side of empathy for me, I think, as well, as a partner in it. My wife really, there was although we didn't suffer loss, there was a trauma in it, from an emotional perspective, for sure. And you know, it was like every friend who got pregnant, every friend that had a kid, you know, it was like every single time it was like a stab, you know, stabbing her heart. So like and it didn't directly affect me like that. I'm definitely the more hopeful, optimistic one in our relationship. And there were times, I remember she shared this phrase, toxic optimism, you know, like not always having this toxic optimism. So like understanding when was like the right time to share like the optimistic viewpoint on it, and when's like the time to just like listen. And part of that was like, we went to a couples therapist throughout it too, and that was like key in getting through it, because we were able to have like a third party there to kind of like share the perspectives, understand each other's outlook. And I would, like, for any couple dealing with infertility, I'd highly recommend like getting that level of support that's just like completely unbiased, completely third party, to make sure you're also like protecting your relationship with your partner while going through infertility.
That's so important. You know, I think that it's so good to hear from you, because a lot of people neglect the male's perspective when it comes to the infertility struggle. Because I know that, you know, my fiance, he suffered every single thing that I went through. He was right there with me the whole entire time, from my first fibroid diagnosis to needing to have surgery and being right by my side, and then, you know, hearing potentially that we may never be able to conceive, and all these things. I think that's, you know, I think it's really important for you to speak out, because a lot of times men's side isn't, you know, seen.
And I mean, for anybody that has to do IVF or IUI, and like that's how they get pregnant, like you spend a lot of your like formative adult years trying not to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And, right. And then and then you're like, have this fairy tale, like, oh, you get pregnant, birds and bees, like you're going to make love with your partner, you're going to like have a baby. And then like, I hope a lot of men never have to see this, but like, you're like in a doctor's office with like a plastic couch with a stack of like porno mags that like that like your dad may give you when you're like 12 or 13. You know, like this is like not glamorous, you know. And like, that's how, and then an embryologist is going to make it happen. So like, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows, like when I walked in that room and saw that green couch, I'm scarred. I'm so scarred from that green couch. Anyway, we'll stop that.
No, just imagine.
Yes, thank you so much, Michael. I'm so happy to hear from a dad. So my husband, it's funny that you mentioned the whole green couch and the stack of magazines, because of course, you know, through my journey, we did the entire infertility workup, you know, to see if something, even though each pregnancy loss was so different, I just was, I was like, we have to do all the things. And I remember him talking about like, this is just so unnatural, like walking into this room. And he's just like, and then it's all these old magazines. Like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not attracted to any of these magazines. But yeah, it is a very, it's a really jarring experience from what you think, you know what I mean? And that again is like you mentioning, like we spend so much time, so much of our adult lives trying not to get pregnant, because we're told in high school that, you know, if you look at, you know, someone you're attracted to, you can get pregnant, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and it's like, there's so much unlearning we really should be doing, and we should be, you know, teaching the right things to, you know, our kids. Because
I mean, I barely knew what ovulation was. Like, right. And I took AP biology, like, you know, like what, like,
right.
You know, I didn't know anything.
So much. There are so many things that are just wrong. You know what I mean? There are things that we learn that are incorrect. And I think that, you know, if we started these conversations much earlier and had, you know, a proper education in them, that I think that would help with normalizing the conversations of the spectrum, you know, of the spectrum of what can happen and when complications do arise, and that you do have options, you know?
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. I know, you know, when it comes to my infertility struggle, I know that the question was like, how has it changed you? I know that, you know, 2.5 months, January 30th, when I had my son, I had to have a planned C-section, and I had to have it at 37 weeks because when I had my laparoscopic myomectomy to have my fibroids removed, one of the things is that you can never have a natural birth. You have to have a C-section because you have now all these, you know, incisions that were on your uterus, and one of them can rupture, right, during childbirth. So the whole point was I could not go into labor because that's a whole nother issue and could put me into a whole nother statistic where I could have died literally in labor. But my son, becoming the fact that he was born early at 37 weeks, his lungs were underdeveloped. So he was in the NICU for 10 days. So it was a lot of anxiety around the fact that, like, you know, not only will he be okay, because at some point I realized that he would be, but also feeling responsible because my issue, my infertility issue and my desire to conceive and get him here is the reason why that he had to be born early, because I could have died if I went to term. So, you know, I had to release the fact that the doctor made the best decision, weighing out the options of, you know, you're like, we can take care of him if something, you know, if he has any issues, his lungs were underdeveloped, and you know, we could take care of it. With you, you know, you could have died on the table. So just releasing that, you know, with my partner, him and I, just knowing that that was the best option, although our baby laid in the NICU. So that whole process was really hard, and it made me start to think back when I was 18 and 19 and taking the depot shot, and, you know, all these different things that could have, I'm sure, led to my infertility, and no one having the discussion with me about these lifestyle changes that I needed to make much earlier. So like you said, I think that we have to start these conversations much earlier, so people are aware of what they're up against, you know, because yes, I had a baby. It was so exciting, but it was still a journey. I still had to have a C-section. I still had to, watch my baby lay in a NICU for 10 days, which affected my recovery and all these other things that I had. It hasn't yet ended. My infertility struggle is something that is still happening. I'm just coming to the end of it. I have a healthy baby now, but it was getting here, the whole entire process. So it's affected me in a way that it's like, I will never be silent about what I went through ever again. And I will always ask, this is totally me now, asking friends, asking young people, anybody I come in contact with, like, how is your periods? How are your periods? Releasing the stigma of talking about just like, are you, what kind of pads and tampons do you use?
Yeah.
Because certain pads and tampons, they have carcinogens in it, and you use them over time, and that can affect your your feminine health as well. So there's so many different things that really made me have the conversation. Like, just like you said, like I found myself always wanting to have conversations, but my audience, they were looking for comedy. I didn't know that they wanted to hear this. Yeah. But turns out everybody wants to have this conversation. Everybody wants to talk about, and overcome the stigmas when it comes to childbirth, because it's supposed to be so easy and so natural. The same thing with, breastfeeding. My birth plan was to breastfeed, but my baby laid in a NICU and I couldn't touch him for 10 days. So all I could do was pump. And when it came time to start getting him to latch, he was like, So working with the lactation specialist and all these different things to try to, overcome all of these hurdles that I was up against, all because of these fibroids, that if I would have had a conversation with somebody with much younger, much earlier, I probably could have overcame.
Yeah.
I mean, so much, I have 4 girls between 11 and 15, one who I gave birth to, and 3 stepdaughters. Again, you never know how you're going to come into different people's.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just, I'm like all period, all stuff, like it's just like, you got to talk about everything. And I'm like, you're going to see a midwife, real early on I remember, for your first healthcare provider who's holistic and who's, going to talk the whole thing, and it'll start. I hope that, like, cause now we're all talking a lot more than, what we might've received, or certainly our parents and grandparents. So, again,
you're teaching your girls very early to advocate for themselves and, see holistic, seek holistic help earlier, because, by the time I had my issue, I had no choice but to seek surgery, but surgery is not always the best option.
Right.
But people don't have that conversation. And for me, it had already gotten, it was too late. But having these conversations with your girls much earlier will make them say, hey, something's not right, or this is the way this is supposed to function. So when it's not functioning properly, they know how to seek help or who to talk to. It relieves all those stigmas of just like being able to really, have a direct conversation about what's going on with your body.
Totally. And I think what's so amazing to hear in all of your stories, actually, like one thing I really want to take away for everybody who's listening or might listen to this later, is that all of you kept asking and sought more opinions and went into it. Right. And that's so important. You knew to trust that in yourself and to be like, hang on, I need to ask these questions, and I need to maybe changing care providers is huge. And it's hard to do for some people. Like, it's hard. You have to, right. It's like, so I commend you all for that, and for sharing that again, and sharing that advocacy that you're doing. Because I think when you share that you all self-advocated, it really helps people know. And I'm like, the people you hire, you've just hired them. They don't have to remain your longtime person.
Exactly.
So as we come to a close, I guess I'd love to share, if you could each of you share a couple tips, recommendations, thoughts for people who are, deeply in it, or those who are thinking about, conceiving, but for really people who are struggling and having a hard time and going through it, like just some thoughts, tips, things to share. And I'm going to drop everybody's Instagram handle in the chat for people watching, so you can follow everybody here. But yeah, if you guys could just jump in on that and share some thoughts with everybody on the way out.
Yeah. One thing I would say is, first and foremost, be ultra kind to yourself and give yourself so much grace. And if you are partnered, give each other all the grace and all the patience. There is no one way to navigate these things. There are no perfect words that anyone can say to you. But just remember that. Remember that. Take your time through this. And I would also say, find those little moments of joy and hold on to those through your journey, because that is what is going to carry you through. This time will pass. Whatever it is that you're going through, this time, the darkness will pass and you will find light again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh man, I can go. So number one, just try to take it a day at a time if you can. Like, on both ends, don't borrow sorrows that, the things that haven't happened, and who knows what the end will bear. So, try to take it one day at a time. And for all the guys out there or partnered folks going through this, like, talk about it, find someone to talk about it with, be open about it. It's not, it's like any other health thing, right? It's not necessarily something to bottle up inside. We've said in this conversation, you never know who you mention it to, and someone has great advice or a shared experience. And I think it's time we all talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would just say, you have to be your own advocate. You have to ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research, whatever you're going through. And I would say seek a bunch of opinions, as many as it takes till you feel comfortable with your diagnosis or whatever you're going through. That's the biggest thing. So you have to feel comfortable. Like, your doctor is not the end all be all. It's okay, like you said, to switch providers. It's okay to, get a second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th, 12th opinion, whatever it takes. So that's what I would just encouraging people to find a support system. Just kind of piggybacking on what you all have said, definitely find your support system. Come to things like this so you can hear as many stories as you possibly can, because you never know what's going to resonate.
Thank you all. This was super powerful and amazing to just listen to your stories. And I know you, Marise and Michael, and hadn't heard the whole story. And Simone, it's amazing to meet you and get to hear your story too. And I know it's so helpful to people who are either listening right now or going to watch this later. So really, really thank you all to everybody. We'll see you all again soon, and hopefully you'll come on out to Hatch for some more different talks. We do lots of talks here. So come on out for our lactation class, postpartum prep class, lots of other things that Hatch is running this year. And thanks to all of you. And let's can I take a quick photo with all of us?
Go for it.
All right. Awesome. I'll share you. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Simone. Bye, Jada.
Bye. Awesome to see you guys again. And Simone, I would love to connect as we're expanding into LA more and more.
So please, yes.
Yes, totally going to reach out to you, Simone.
Yeah. So good. All right. Take care, everybody.
Good night.